Viewers, violence has become the routine go-to option to protest against policy decisions by the government. The pattern first emerged in 2019 when the government brought in the CAA. It was a law passed by Parliament, but one would have thought from the reaction, the rioting, the communalization, that it was brought in on the whim of the Prime Minister and solely the Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Ever since then, whether in response to the Kisan laws that were again passed by Parliament, or the progressive move to keep hijabs out of the classroom, once again underwritten by a 3-judge bench of the Karnataka High Court, and now the recently announced Agnipath scheme, which has been introduced after consulting all major defense stakeholders. Dissidents, sometimes in collaboration with opposition parties, have rampaged through the streets to express their anger. It's almost as if the government of the day is out to push people against the wall. That's what it appears like, because the reaction, viewers, is completely over the top. When you ask these protesters or the opposition parties, why are you resorting to violence? They say, we've been pushed to the wall. What can we do? Well, you can move court. You can hold a peaceful demonstration, a peaceful satyagraha. But obviously, viewers, some people are more invested in turning India into a mobocracy. We just saw it recently, a satyagraha called by the Congress against the ED's move to summon Rahul Gandhi. You saw the mayhem. Several states, several cities held to ransom, held hostage. A democracy cannot be held hostage by mobs. If that happens repeatedly, India will turn into a mobocracy. It will cease to be a democracy. Routinely, punitive measures adopted by, let's say, for example, the Yogi Adityanath government to bring arsonists and vandals to book are opposed as ultra-virus of the Constitution. Courts are moved, whether it is in Kashmir or it is in Kanpur, in an attempt to shackle the state. Is all this part of a playbook to burn India? Create the impression of a weak government that doesn't have and handle over governance? I remember, viewers, when I was interviewing General Rawat when he was army chief, he came out and said quite clearly that he believed very firmly that there was a plot against the nation, against the arms of the nation that are entrusted with the onerous task of maintaining harmony, peace, and equanimity. He said, in the context of Kashmir, the state there, the army, in fact, in particular, was being deluged by court cases to trap it, to make it almost impossible for it to act without the fear of sanction. No police officer, no army personnel can do his or her job if he or she is constantly looking over his or her shoulder. Is this therefore a conspiracy? I'm keeping it very simple, maybe even simplistic. This is the question we will examine tonight. Let's go straight across to our panelists on Converse. Let me begin with Amit Malviya, the national spokesperson of the BJP. Mr. Malviya, the BJP constantly believes that the NDA is under siege. It's under siege from Andolanjivis or all sorts of other actors, sometimes beyond our borders, to make India look like a state that is dissembling, falling apart, and the government is wicked, evil, anarchist. Why do you feel like this?
Well, Rahul, let me take you back to 2014. Victory of Prime Minister Narendra Modi was quite a surprise to the people who had governed India for the longest time. Let me say this unequivocally, that an alliance between the communists and the Islamists in various forms and formats was the one that was ruling over India. They changed their form, they came about in different shapes and sizes, but at the end of it, their core ideology was hinged on this axis. The 2014 win was quite a surprise for them, and they did not expect Prime Minister Modi, who they had tried really hard to stop from becoming the Prime Minister, to have got a full mandate. Then started a series of orchestrated events. The church attack, minorities are under threat narrative, the beef controversy, the Awad Wapasi gang, and it continued through the initial term of the first government. Nothing worked. Prime Minister Modi's government survived several allegations and fake campaigns and misinformation campaign, and came back to power in 2019 with a much bigger mandate. All hell, of course, broke loose when Article 370 was revoked, the Supreme Court opined on the long pending Ayodhya issue, the CAA was legislated. They smelt an opportunity. They realized that the electoral veto that this axis had lost had to be replaced with something different. And they chose to exercise what I call the street veto. We saw similar protests starting from the CAA to most recently the Congress party doing a satyagraha. We are now seeing it again unfold post the Agnipath recruitment announcement, and there has been a pattern to this. There is a visible trend. There are mobs that come out in large numbers, there's arsoning, pelting, there are appeals that are issued, and the actors remain same. The farm crisis saw them active. We are seeing them active now. Once the Agnipath has been announced, they were the same people who led the charge when CAA was legislated. But who are those people? The communists primarily, who direct the entire show, and they use the Islamists as their foot soldiers, as the cannon fodder in this entire campaign. And they sort of transform themselves into various roles depending on the campaign, depending on the issue, depending on the agitation they want to do. Therefore, this is not a spontaneous outpouring by any stretch of imagination. It is a fairly well orchestrated campaign. It's a very well-oiled machinery that is at work. Obviously, the agenda is to weaken the country politically, financially, now even militarily, so that this government and Prime Minister Modi can be discredited as people who do not know how to govern and can't keep this country united. This is likely to continue in the run-up to the 2024 election at a huge cost, not just to the government and the BJP as a political entity, but also to the country. But I'm sure, Rahul, that the people of this country are much wiser, and with the information now available to people, they know exactly what is happening. 2014 saw the end of the electoral veto of this nexus. 2024 will see the end of the street veto of this nexus. Lastly, there has been a very uncomfortable truce between the people of this country and those who are part of this communist Islamist nexus. This truce, this artificial peace that had been created by the idea of Nehruvian secularism, has to be called out and it has to be done away with. 2024 will do that.
2024 will do that. Let me bring in straight away Ashutosh, political analyst, Dr. Anand Ranganathan, now into this conversation. Electoral veto that Axis lost had to be replaced by a street veto. The veto is exercised through arson, violence, all sorts of other divisive tactics that turn India into an absurd theatre of destabilization and, worst of all, Ashutosh, worst of all, anarchy. Response.
Rahul, if I had not known that I'm living in 2022, I would have easily been reminded of 1974, a man called Vidyacharan Shukla, and the Prime Minister was Mrs. Indira Gandhi. She always used to speak when there had been people on the streets or opposition were opposing the government on the policy issues. There is a foreign hand. So any government which is authoritarian government, a government which is a dictatorial government, a government who doesn't believe in the democracy, a government who doesn't believe into the power of the people, a government who doesn't take stakeholders in confidence while making policies, they always find some enemy somewhere. And I call such governments, whether it was a Congress government led by Indira Gandhi or the government led by whatever, is a delusional government, because the divide of realities, they live in their own make-believe world, which is created by some kind of inferiority complex. This government has got the mandate in 2014, has got the mandate in 2019, and if it still is this government think that the people on the streets are their enemy, then there is something wrong. The problem with the government is it does not believe in people. It does not believe in consultation. You impose demonetization without talking to the people. You impose GST without talking to the people. You impose lockdown without talking to the people. You come out with a farms law, which was a good law, and I had gone on record and saying this is a good law, this has to be supported. And people are on the street. You come out with a CAA, people come out on the street, and the people on the street, you blame people, and you blame Islamists. This government can be called as the weakest government because this government has surrendered before the Middle Eastern countries like Qatar. And the biggest conspirator was, within court, was my dear friend Nupur Sharma, who created a situation where the Islamist forces came out openly and asked the government, it never happened in the last 70 years, that India was asked to apologize. Can you imagine something like this? So let's look within. The government has to look within. Who are their advisors? Who are their spokesperson? And why people are angry on the street? If the students are angry on the streets today, government has to think about it, why this is happening. What are the reasons? In place of not believing in democracy and giving an authoritarian lecture somewhere.
Okay, maybe, I don't know, I didn't make myself clear, but I just wanted to ask you, there's a contradiction in what you're saying. Can you please clarify that for the viewer? You say people vote for it, yet the government thinks that the people are enemies. So, and this is not just one election now. We have seen at least, at last count, including all the state elections, between the two Lok Sabha elections, we are talking about in the region of about 48 state elections, out of which quite a few, the BJP has also won. So can you explain this contradiction? Why does the BJP keep coming back? Because the people like to be kicked, are you saying, constantly? I'm sure that's not what you're saying.
The arithmetic of democracy is such that the first past system, if you get 40% vote, and that's what the Congress party has been getting in the rule for 55 years. So the rest of the people, even if you get 45% vote or the 48% vote, at least there will be 52% who has not voted. So if you keep imagining that these 52% people are the 55% people, they are not the people, but they are enemy of the government. Somebody who's not voting them is enemy of the government.
And the 45%
you're
are
talking
also
about
enemies.
Islamists. You're talking about the communists. I think the communists.
So they're not 55% communists and Islamists in our country. Islamists are a
That's
fringe, and the communists are a fringe even more to the left of the Islamists.
That's what I'm saying. They believe that the farmers are their enemies. They think that the Shaheen Bagh.
But they won the election in Uttar Pradesh, which has the largest number of farmers. I'm a bit confused.
That's what I'm asking. So the government should think about it. Why people are why the students are on the street? Where are the bulldozers now? Why don't you identify those people and use bulldozers? So if politics is run by bulldozers, this is what is going to happen. Someday somebody will come up and
maybe because the government doesn't think that students are the enemies, so they don't need to run, or the students have a genuine concern, so they don't need to run the bulldozers over them. Maybe that's the reason why.
Because they are not identified as Muslim.
Okay, so it's only Muslims that are targeted by the bulldozer. Is that oversimplification, Ashutosh ji? Because there's a lot of material in front of me which suggests that a large number of Hindus are also upset, or people of other faiths, because it's not only demolitions that are happening in, one or two places in Kanpur, but they're happening across the board. Even in Noida, where all of us broadcast out of, there are people, very rich people, very well-heeled people, Hindus, whose farmhouses are being razed because they're illegal.
I do not know where you are looking at. Supreme Court has very clearly said, and the ex-Chief Justice of Allahabad High Court has said, whatever the UP government has done is an illegal, unconstitutional, anti-democratic. And
the Supreme Court hasn't said that. The Supreme Court says that the UP government must follow guidelines. It was a general direction which is given, and they haven't stayed the bulldozer drive. At least that's what...
Why Supreme Court need to tell an executive that you follow the law?
But why not? The matter is before them. They've not said that you haven't followed the law, therefore you follow it. They've said just generally be careful about following the law.
Supreme Court has been kind enough not to spell out that, but the intent is very clear.
Oh, so the Supreme Court is kind to the government but unkind to the people who are suffering the injustice of seeing their beautiful homes, their homes that they dreamt about for many years and constructed with meager savings, being demolished. Is that what you're saying, Ashutosh ji?
No, I am saying two things.
Okay.
One, the government led by BJP is a delusional government who does not believe in taking taking people in confidence while formulating a policy. That's the point number one. And secondly, this always looks some kind of enemy as a scapegoat.
I think you're saying not two things, but both things.
Your BJP spokesperson are talking about communists and Islamists.
Okay, let me bring in.
These students are Islamists or on the street?
Okay.
We're insulting them. These are the youths of the country who are unemployed. The unemployed is the highest in this country since independence.
I hope you don't believe
that. You want to believe them, they are Islamists, they are communists.
Ashutosh ji, I hope you're not...
delusion.
Okay, but Ashutosh ji, I hope you're not deluded enough to think that violence is the answer to any grievance. I hope that...
That's why that the RSS has to think in 1974 onward why the RSS was indulging into arsons.
Okay, so two wrongs make a right.
Other kinds of violence.
See, that's the problem.
They should before.
You are not saying two
why
things.
Did they indulge in violence?
You are saying both things, and both things is worrying. You're not saying two things. You're saying both things. You're saying that violence is okay. This violence is okay.
I'm only saying is that today BJP is finding it
Let's
problematic.
open it up.
When
Dr.
the Ayodhya movement was going on,
I want to bring in Dr. Ranganathan.
When Babri Masjid was demolished, they did not find it problematic.
Okay, Dr. Ranganathan, are you...
1974 onwards,
okay.
When the people were on the street and openly supported by RSS, they did not find it problematic. Today they find it problematic.
Today.
Why?
Because it is a problem. Violence is a problem.
It's a problem, I know that. But
so
BJP should not...
Okay.
BJP and RSS should not be pursuing the...
Look, I'm very confused right now. It's been about 12 minutes into the debate and my head is spinning. Dr. Ranganathan, am I the only one, or are you also feeling similarly spun around in the head by what I believe are not two things but both things simultaneously that Ashutosh says, which is sort of leading to a contradiction in his arguments?
Rahul, tell me honestly, is it the weekend revelry or the spirit that makes you go weak at the knees and being kind at Ashutosh when you say that he contradicted himself only once? I'm sorry, but every single sentence of his was a contradiction. Let me point just one. In the context of street violence and these protests, Ashutosh says that this government has been dictatorial and draconian. Really? For not removing the illegal Shaheen Bagh protests for 6 months, for not removing the illegal Farm Bill protests from Singhu borders and other borders for 1.5 years, costing inconvenience to millions of commuters, death, destruction, mayhem, financial loss of tens of lakhs of crores. That is the sign of a dictator, or like Idi Amin, that is a sign of a demagogue. So, but let me ignore that, because Ashutosh, whatever he says, remains a very good friend. Now let me come to this topic and let me humbly disagree with my other good friend Mr. Amit Malviya as well. Ashutosh is right in one thing, that while Indira Gandhi was blaming the foreign hand, this government through Mr. Amit Malviya is blaming urban Naxal, Bourbon Naxal, or whatever you may call it. But at the end, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Vultures always hover over the tower of silence. It is not the vulture's fault. It is what a vulture does. Fault is of those who have been silently watching India fall into a grip of anarchy since 2019. It is their fault. And chief among them are the Supreme Court of India and the Government of India. The harsh truth is that India has lost, anarchism has won. I dare say the entire nation has had it till here. With all this Kadi Ninda, Kathor Ninda, one can't help but hark back to that awful day last year, Republic Day, when the state allowed anarchists to run riot and hold the capital to ransom. Most cases were later on withdrawn. Free legal representation provided for the rest, even compensation. Even of this enough master stroke, 5D chess, hashtag outrage, ab tandav hoga. Arey bhai, take action. Fix accountability. Anarchy cannot be thwarted or pushed back by reason or logic. Only by applying the rule of law. And who applies the rule of law? Who sanctions it? Who protects it? Who reports it? And what are they doing? Let it be known that the exalted four pillars, the judiciary, the legislature, the executive and the media, support anarchy, not democracy. Today, all four have collapsed. The whole structure of democracy has as though been dynamited. Am I indulging in bombast or hyperbole? Only if you think that the abdication of the sacrosanct duties of these four pillars is nothing to be ashamed of. Only if you think that the inevitable vacuum that is created when justice and rule of law whooshes away is not filled at once by anarchy and bloodshed. Only if you never believe in the rule of law, so are not worried by its absence. Where do we go from here? Who do we turn to? Which pillar do we lean our backs against? I do not know. We are always either waiting for God or Godot. Our expectations are like that river that empties into the ocean, lost and forgotten. Perhaps it is better that it runs dry. Rahul, these anarchists and fundamentalists don't believe in man-made laws. For them, right to protest is also right to prevent. They don't mind blocking roads if it suits them. Did Ashutosh even once in the last 2 years condemn the blocking of Singhu borders by these farm protesters? No. They don't mind marching amid COVID lockdowns and curfews if it suits them. They don't mind setting trains on fires like they're doing today, pelting stones, killing policemen, though they don't mind it. They are a law unto themselves. And let me tell you bluntly, the anarchists are always watching the proceedings with a keen eye, always looking for a crack. And when they see the government, the Supreme Court, the police, the media as weak and scared, from Shaheen Bagh to 370 abrogation to farm laws to blasphemy protection to now this, they sense their opportunity and they swoop like vultures. I paraphrase in the end, Rahul, just 10 seconds. Mahakavi Dinkar, as though he's speaking of democracy. And I ask, दाई है कौन विपद का? हम दोषी किसको कहें तुम्हारे वध का? I'm sorry, the finger also points at you, me and all of us.
All of us. The right to protest, also the right to prevent, a law unto themselves. First, Mr. Malviya, a quick response to Dr. Ranganathan on the first part of what he was saying, focusing on your pusillanimity in bringing in the law. For example, I'm going to ask you very, very clearly, where are the bulldozers? Why aren't they running against the Agnipath vandals? Simple question.
As far as what Anand said is concerned, I give him the luxury of making these statements, and he perhaps has some reason to do so. Whereas those who are in government and responsible for ensuring that we run a sensitive administration that takes care of all views and opinions and allows people the space to even dissent, even if they turn anarchist, is something that we are also burdened with, and we realize the weight of the trust that people have put in us. So much as I agree with him, and in an ideal world, a government with the kind of majority that we have should probably go down that path. But then there are a lot of other sensitivities that politicians and those in office have to be mindful of. And therefore, while I would not grudge him that luxury, I would also do what I think is right and give it the time that is required, and perhaps at times give it more time than what it should be given. But having said that, what is also important is that the people of this country have to see through the designs of these people. For example, the farm law was a law that was meant to benefit as many as maybe 85-90% of the farmers who are small and marginalized. But the government did take a decision to roll them back because there were other security implications, and the Prime Minister very categorically said कि मैंने जो किया वो किसानों के लिए किया, और जो कर रहा हूँ, that is taking the law back, वो देश के लिए कर रहा हूँ. That is the kind of leadership that Prime Minister Modi has provided to the country, and I think we should not look it through the prism of weakness or pusillanimity, as you are calling it, but as someone who knows exactly where to draw the line. That's point number one.
So why
the
don't
second
you be
point
benevolent?
Is that,
Why don't you be then benevolent to the poor students, the yuvaks who are out there in Bihar and several other states, at last count 9 other states, burning crores of taxpayer property.
Around 10 seconds.
And then also be a little benevolent to the taxpayer. And don't keep extracting the recompense from them. आपका benevolence थोड़ा selective रहता है, लोग कहेंगे.
Rahul, it's not about selective benevolence. I want to tell you very categorically that those who are responsible for vandalizing the property will be dealt with as per law.
Okay.
And those who have vandalized public property, put train to fire and have done other such act are clearly not students at all.
They're not students.
Men who are wanting to serve the country through the armed forces are not the people who are torching these trains
Dr. Ranganathan,
and
quick
public
one.
transport.
Dr. Ranganathan, quick one before I open this up.
We have to go underneath it, and you will see what follows in the days ahead.
Okay, Dr. Ranganathan, he's answering you. He's a sensitive government. You're a very prickly person.
My good friend Amit has a way with words. All Amits, the politician Amits, all Amits have a way with words. But that doesn't mean they're right. Let me give 2 examples and mark these words of mine, Rahul. 8 o'clock, sometime in the very near future, Mr. Modi is going to come on television and says, मैंने ये अग्निवीर स्कीम देश के जवानों के लिए बनाई थी, लेकिन मैं देश की रक्षा के लिए वापस लेता हूं. Let me ask a very simple question. Amit himself acknowledges that the farm laws that were supported by all political parties, in fact was in the manifesto of the Congress, the farm laws were brought in, and it transpires that 86% of the farmers agreed with it, wanted it. Let us say I am a farmer. Modi said in the coming 10 years, these farm laws are going to catapult your income, are going to catapult India's GDP, are going to make you prosperous 20 times. But माफ करना, मैं देश के हित के लिए ये फार्म लॉज वापस लेता हूं. तुम जितना कमा सकते थे कमा नहीं पाओगे, देश जितना आगे बढ़ सकता था वो बढ़ नहीं पाएगा. How can one be so arcane, mysterious in a democracy? How can you say on a whim कि देश के लिए वापस ले रहा हूं, but at the same time the masses, the farmers whom you agree would have benefited from this are going to incur losses of tens of lakhs of crores? I'm sorry. Democracy doesn't just work on the whims of, even though you say a trustworthy politician, I'm prepared to believe that. But he has to explain. देश के हित के लिए वापस लिया, कौन सा हित? That is abstract. This was not. Farm laws would have benefited the whole country, and I'm afraid Agniveer looks very likely to be going the same route.
Well, one hopes not. One hopes not. I want to
respond.
Okay, quick response.
10 seconds, Rahul.
Yeah, take 1 minute. Then we'll go
very quickly.
Yeah.
While we would have liked the farm laws to be implemented in the form that they were passed by the parliament, but having withdrawn them also has not left the marginalized and the small farmers in peril. Prime Minister Modi, given his vision, has already put in an e-mandi system in place even before these farm laws were legislated, giving the farmers the option to get online and actually be able to sell their proceeds. They can do so in state governments that have been progressive and taken elements of this law and implemented in their states, and most BJP ruled states have done so. Therefore, we have not left the farmer in peril. We have given them alternative. We have given them arrangements that they could lean on to and make the money that they would be otherwise if this farm law was implemented at the national level.
Anyhow, we are moving a little away from the main issue. You could have withdrawn it by saying that, look, those states that want to implement it can do so. Those that don't can, well, go ahead and withdraw it. So that could have been the option, but there was a complete surrender. Tehseen Poonawalla, the sum and substance of this debate is that it appears that the right to protest has become the right to prevent, and sometimes, and there is a pattern, using violence, arson, intimidation to do so. You just have to look at Maharashtra. There, the principle was applied in the inverse. Two people came to protest against the Hanuman Chalisa and that sort of controversy, and they stood outside Matoshri. They were locked up for sedition. So, Tehseen Poonawalla, this is really, really worrisome. Mob rule, and the opposition fans it, justifies it.
Namaskar, Rahul. Thank you for having me on the show. Namaskar to all my fellow panelists and to all your viewers. Your moot question of this show and of this converse today is there a conspiracy to destabilize India through protests, whether they're violent protests or anarchy? And that's your moot question. And I do agree that there is a conspiracy to destabilize India. I completely agree with you and Anand Ranganathan. But this conspiracy is hatched by the present union government. This government is in cahoots with enemies of this country. And I'm absolutely responsibly saying what I'm saying. If I'm offending somebody, it's absolutely purely intentional. This government is in cahoots with enemies of this nation to destabilize this nation only because this government does not understand governance. Let me give you 3 examples that were raised on this very show of yours. A, the farm laws completely being spoken about. Can you imagine if the farm laws were in place today, the Essential Commodities Act that would allow hoarding to friends of the governor, of the government, people who are bosses of the prime minister, they would be hoarding. This in wholesale inflation, which is 15.72% as of today, would have skyrocketed to about 80-85%. That is what the Essential Commodities Act tend to do. I'm sorry, Dr. Ranganathan, when the Congress spoke about farm reforms and mandi reforms, they did not say the Essential Commodities Act should be modified the way Modi modified it. What sort of a strange government is this? Farmers don't understand the farm laws. Economists don't understand demonetization. Army recruits don't understand the Agnipath reforms. Only the government understands it. Please let me speak, sir. Let me tell you about the farm laws because they're continuously being spoken about it, an example of violence. Sir, I was involved in the farm law protests with Mr. Tikayat. All of us wanted to go to Jantar Mantar or Ram Leela Maidans to protest, which is our right given to us by the constitution of this country, by the Supreme Court. The government did not allow us to go. Why did you not allow us to go? Why did you put us on the border? Why did you shut the roads? I went against this government, against CAA, to the Honorable Supreme Court. I went peacefully. Why has the government of India still not notified the CAA laws? Why are you not ready to face us in the Supreme Court? Because you want anarchy, because you want this country to collapse. Where is Amit Shah ji? He's the most consistent Home Minister of this country. Every time there are protests or there's anarchy in this country, the one man missing is Amit Shah, whether it's Delhi, whether it's Madhya Pradesh, whether it's Karnataka, whether it's Rajasthan, whether it's Jharkhand, whether it's Kerala, whether it's West Bengal. Amit Shah disappears. He disappears like Mr. India. Amit disappeared in Mr. India, except in Mr. India, Anil Kapoor could be found with red glasses. Here, Amit Shah will not be found till the end. And therefore, I end with one saying, because my good friend Dr. Anand Ranganathan, for whom I have a lot of respect, quoted Dinkar. Modi insaf de na saka, आशीष समाज की ले न सका, उल्टे विपक्ष को बांधने चला जो था असाध्य साधने चला. जब नाश मनुष्य पर छाता है, पहले विवेक मर जाता है. इनका विवेक मर चुका है. इनका विवेक ही नहीं मर चुका है, इनका जो अंदर का जो इनके अंदर अंतरात्मा है वो भी मर चुकी है. That is why they're coming up with these half-brain schemes which they have to change in 24 hours.
My name, so just 10 seconds.
Okay, yeah, quick.
And I also want to publicly congratulate you for the
Rahul,
phenomenal work you're doing with
because
regards to TV, Dr. Ranganathan. I also want to publicly congratulate you for that.
Congratulate me.
You are not researching on TV.
Thank you. Rahul, my good friend Tehseen, who refuses to take me out for lunch because he's a conjuice. I don't know how he is. I mean, you're married into a family that has thousands of crores and still he doesn't treat me to a lunch. But anyway, he took my name and he said such lies about the Congress and the farm laws. I am forced to rebut him by quoting verbatim. Here is point 11 from the 2019 Congress manifesto under agriculture. Quote, Congress will repeal the APMC Act, something that incidentally Modi did not aim to do. He just wanted to give a choice. Congress will repeal the APMC Act and make trade in agricultural produce, including exports and interstate trade, free from all restrictions. And here is point number 21 from the same Congress manifesto. Essential Commodities Act belongs to the age of controls. Congress promises to remove it. Tehseen, apna manifesto to pad lo yaar. Come on.
Let me.
One second. Tehseen is an honest capitalist. He doesn't want to read a communist manifesto. Look,
please allow me to rebut him on this one.
Come on. Yes, go ahead. Tehseen.
While the Congress implemented those reforms in the states it's in power, for example, in Kerala and in Maharashtra, it promised the minimum guarantee on law. So in
you've been caught out, hit wicket, bold, York, whatever. Come on. You said we never promised. Now, come on. No, one second.
Allow me to answer.
Tehseen, you've got the entire issue confused. We are not discussing the farm law. We are not discussing rollback politics.
I agree, but since he brought it up, I'm rebutting
No, one second. No one is opposing the right to dissent. We are opposing here the right to use violence. That's what we are debating. Why are we running away from the issue? Mr. Supariwala, do you condone the violence?
Yeah.
You might, because you said that bringing down the Babri Masjid was a single achievement. 17 minutes mein humne tod diya tha usko. Sanjay Rawat ne bola tha. So maybe I'm asking the wrong party the wrong question because you have used violence as an instrument. So I want to ask you, do you condemn the violence?
Discussion is about.
Do you condemn the violence? Simple question.
I'm quoting Indian Penal Code 19, Indian Penal Code 21(1). Please check. Every citizen of India, as per the constitutional right, has the right to protest peacefully. We cannot write off protest from our constitution. Am I right or wrong? How and where it leads to during the protest is under a question right now.
Under a
Definitely
question?
a peaceful protest is always allowed and is permitted as per the Indian law and the constitution. Every citizen has the right to protest injustice. Secondly, if it takes a wild turn or something goes wrong, definitely it is punishable, but also it depends on the state, how it is controlling and how it is handling the people around. Whenever these protests have come up, I will just like to say one thing. When you were talking about my dear friend, all these people, I do not remember the names of everybody. Dr. Ranganathan was there. My friend Tehseen Poonawala also said something. But in some places, I definitely agree with Mr. Ashutosh's point that about the BJP government being in a democracy without any intimation coming at 12 o'clock in the night and Notebandi starts, GST starts, farmer laws are changed, not taking into consideration anybody. I just remember two lines that Sachai chup nahi sakti, बनावट के उसूलों से कि खुशबू आ नहीं सकती कभी कागज के फूलों से। तो ये जो का कागज का फूल हमारे देश में खिला हुआ है, एंड वी हैव वोटेड फॉर द सेम, सबका साथ सबका विकास, वेयर इज इट गॉन? I cannot see any vikas. I can see just protests happening because of some person, some random spokesperson, an irresponsible spokesperson saying something about somebody's religion. Any person will be feeling insulted if a god or a goddess of that particular religion is insulted.
No, can I ask you a follow-up question?
If the prophet is insulted, we have the right to protest.
Supariwala Sahab.
Yeah, please go ahead.
We are drawing a distinction between violence and the right to protest. There is no right to be violent in this country. You yourself have drawn that. Now you have said it also depends on the state. One minute.
I told you,
Mr.
Rahul, whatever I told you,
Sun to lijiye na?
Yes, please continue.
You also said it also depends on the state and how the state reacts and responds. So I want to ask you, how should the state respond?
Not react. I'm not talking about react and respond. I'm talking about controlling. 1 minute. Let me tell you one thing. In sensitive areas where the protests are happening, they should be having enough people to control if something goes wrong. And here, if I tell you today what is happening, I've been always seeing everybody speaking about Islamic terrorism. Let me tell you one thing.
Supariwala
no
Sahab,
religion has anything to
I
do
just want
with
to ask some straight questions.
Or 1 minute, unlawfulness.
No, 1 minute. Can I ask you a straight question?
I want to put a point across. If you're giving me an opportunity to speak, I want to speak. Let me finish my sentence. I just want to put my point across very nicely that remove this word of Islamic terrorism or Islamic gundaism or Islamic whatever. Because terrorism has no religion.
Wow.
There have been several instances where all the learned,
this is not a debate on Islam. Please, Supariwala Sahab, ये victim card नहीं खेलने का. No, I'm stopping. No, this is all.
I want people to understand.
We are not. Don't give your. No, 1 minute. Don't play this victim card. I'm sorry. I'm not going to allow. I'm not going to allow. This is not about. Listen, no one here. Please. No one is talking about. Don't shout, please.
Okay.
पहले आप shout ना कीजिए. Calm down. I'm not on the issue of Islam, sir.
Let me speak on a secular line.
I will ask you a simple question. You respond to the question.
I'm just putting across a point.
Sir.
Yeah, please ask.
Please. I'll just ask a simple question. Do you think when Shiv Sena activists protesting against loss of jobs or the fact that there should be a greater representation of Maharashtrians in state jobs, etc., took to the streets and beat up North Indian taxi drivers, was that right or was that wrong?
What are you talking about? Are you talking about Shiv Sena? Shiv Sena has never done it. You're talking about Manse. You're talking about MNS. Shiv Sena has never done that.
Sir,
Shiv Sena has taken everybody. I think you have.
I can now show you visuals.
Rahul, I need to
don't have your facts right.
Yeah, please. Go ahead.
I also need to come.
No, 1 minute. I'm coming to there. I'm coming there. One more thing.
Yes, Rahul.
One more thing.
Rahul, just 10 seconds.
Manse, Raj Thackeray
Supariwala ji, just 10 seconds. You will like
Raj
this.
Thackeray ji was not allowed. Yeah.
Rahul, now I've heard everything. You know, the good Mr. Supariwala just said that he agrees with Ashutosh. I mean, that instantly sets him apart even from Mrs. Ashutosh, who has never agreed with Ashutosh. I mean, they are saying that Modi should have given ample warning for demonetization. I have been against demonetization. I have written 5 articles against demonetization. लेकिन आप prior warning दे रहे हैं लोगों को, ये कह रहे हैं कि prior warning दीजिए कि अब नोट हटने वाले हैं. ये कौन सा लॉजिक?
One point.
And I just want to end by just asking one question. Mr. Supariwala
I'm not talking about demonetization.
Supariwala ji, please. I did interrupt you. Sir, just 10 seconds.
Okay.
Thank you. You have completely disowned all Shiv Sena's violent agitations and gundagardi over the last 30 years. So let me just ask you one concrete fact. As a Tamilian,
let me come.
And whose forefathers or ancestors rather were hounded in Mumbai in the 60s. I want to ask you a question. You know you're going to be trapped now.
You're talking about.
You know you're going to be trapped. That's why you're interrupting me. Rahul, This is
please
unfair.
say. I'm not. I know my point.
This is unfair.
I know what I'm
Now,
talking about.
Supariwala ji, thank
I
you.
know what I'm talking about. Please go ahead.
मैं
We are
आपसे
talking
बस
about
यही
recent.
पूछना चाह रहा हूं
We are talking about
मैं
recent.
आपसे
You are
यही
going
पूछना
in
चाह रहा
history.
हूं
I will
कि
go to the-
recorded fact
No, I'll go to 1974. I'll
Okay,
go to
okay. Mr.
1974.
Supariwala, don't
Okay,
go so
so
far
the-
back
the-
in time. Just
okay,
go to
so now it is
1992.
Let's talk about.
Just
now
go
it
to
is-
1992. When
Okay.
lower
Let's
everyone's
talk about
faders. This is not going to happen. Please. Please don't shout. Please don't shout. I can ask Supariwala one question which will expose him in 30 seconds flat. You don't even have to talk about Tamils, Dr. Ranganathan. All you have to ask him is whether he agrees with Sanjay Raut. Did Sanjay Raut not say that in 17 minutes they brought down the Babri Masjid? Does he agree with that as a violent form of protest? Supariwala, do you agree with it? The bringing down of Babri Masjid, simple.
1 minute. I'm coming to that point.
But
I'm
aa
coming
jao.
to that point. I'm coming to that point. You are trying to trap me, fine. But
There's
I'll
no
speak
trapping.
my mind and I'll speak as an individual. What has happened in the past, what they have. 1 minute. I'm not. It's okay. You can trap me if you want. But I'm coming here with the reply. Only reply is that Babri Masjid was ordered by the court. The Supreme Court has been honored. All the citizens of India have accepted the
dancing
decision.
around it, dancing around it.
In spite of
dancing around
everything,
it. Answer.
when you are
Shantanu
quoting
Gupta. Shantanu
when you
Gupta
are
comes
quoting-
in very late in the day. Shantanu Gupta, my apologies, my profuse apologies to you. Please don't take it personally. Shantanu Gupta, please. Go ahead. What do you make of these responses? I have not heard a clear one asking people to abjure
Rahul.
violence. There has been a justification
Rahul.
for it. Yes.
Yeah. I think Rahul, Amit Malviya in the starting articulated it well, and I want to take it from there. That after the back-to-back victories of 2004 and 2019, I think it's marked by two important things in politics and governance. One is the, I think, amazing innovation, usage of technology in service delivery, and which stopped leakage. And second thing, the multiple policy reforms. And last 8 years, the list of achievements, accomplishment this government can bank upon, I think all the opposition parties will be envious of them, be it GST, 370, Ayodhya, CAA, triple talaq, OROP, ODOP, surgical strike, UPI, GDP growth, IMF saying that abject poverty is gone. So I think there's hardly any space left in the electoral politics, which was very lazy before 2014. You do some basic tricks, divide Hindus into castes, do Muslim appeasement, and you were able to win elections. And now the politics have become very tough. The electoral politics have become very, very tough. So the only option to show your power is to come on the streets. And I'm sure all of us who respect this government, and I'm sure Dr. Ranganathan also do, I think they have the only hope with this government, and that's why someone like Dr. Anand gets impatient.
Okay,
that I need a Maggie noodle now in 2 minutes, that everything which has not happened last 70 years should happen now, yesterday. I think so I can understand the frustration, but I think because of 24/7 media, responsible channels like you, multiple YouTubers, people are getting to know. Just after the farmer strike in Western UP, BJP won almost every possible. Right, so people are seeing this bluff. So I think, but again, to be relevant, these political parties which don't present any alternative hope, alternative policy, alternative framework, just on the street. But people are watching it, and we are seeing election after election.
Okay.
I think this year we have a couple of election. Next year we have a couple of election, and 2024 we are back with the central election. So I think people's mandate is far more important than the mandate of the people on the street.
Dangal and Danga, unacceptable in a democracy. Viewers, I would really have liked it had the opposition had the gumption today, including the Shiv Sena, to come out and denounce violence as an instrument of dissent. That hasn't quite happened. A justification has been offered. I leave it at this.